Hi, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us here at another library lunch hour at the Central Library and Archives. My name is Lindsay Whitwer. I'm the manager of digital collections at the Library and Archives, and I'm joined today for his first library lunch hour ever with Herbert Duran, our project archivist.
Yes. Hello, everyone.
Today, we're talking about women in performing arts. In particular, we wanted to focus on two collections that we have that intersect and offer, we think, a really interesting narrative that we don't normally see in the archives. When we think of the arts that we collect in the archives, we often have writers and visual artists and photographers and have a very clear visual component. But when it comes to the performing arts, in particular actresses, the collection really speaks about them as working women, as women who are talking about themselves as, they are their instrument of their art. So it offers a really interesting juxtaposition to our other collections on the arts. And in particular, we have the Edith Diaz collection, which came to us in 2018, as well as the Miriam Colon Valle collection, which came to us in 2017. These two actresses knew each other, interacted together, which is really cool. And there's interaction between them in the archives. And we also feel like they both kind of offer a really interesting narrative of actresses, particularly Puerto Rican actresses working in Hollywood, in the theater, working, performing their craft, and how we have them documented in the archive. So Herbert, I don't know if you want to start with telling us a little bit about our actresses.
Sure. Miriam Colon, I think most known for her role as Pacino's mother in Scarface, also starred in Appaloosa, One-Eyed Jacks, The House of the Spirits, The Blue Diner, TV roles in Third Watch, The Cosby Show, All My Children, Better Call Saul, The Virginian, Law and Order, Murder, She Wrote, and she also has a ton of titles in the theater. While Edith Diaz was a working actress whose most notable, I think, biggest feature film was Sister Acts 1 and 2. She was also in the television show Papi, which lasted for about a couple of months, but it was also one of the first Latin-themed cast TV sitcoms in the 70s. She also had minor roles in The Twilight Zone, Murder, She Wrote, Facts of Life, Women in Prison. She did a couple of made-for-TV movies, and she was in Two Gentlemen of Verona for New York Shakespeare.
And so, Herbert, you processed the Edith Diaz collection. What would you say was kind of a standout of that collection? I know we had a lot of conversations while you were processing it.
I think the standout definitely being her advocacy for herself, because like you've mentioned before, an actress's collection is unique because you have the pretty images, the portraits, the glamour shots, but there's also her standing up for herself. When she was terminated from a production, she wrote to the people, and she found other people to kind of help her with investigating, was it discrimination, was it not. Also writing for or writing in response to her to roles being changed from being Latina to not. So she knew that there were very few roles that she could actually audition for. And so when one was taken away, she felt very strongly about, making sure she was able to get something, or audition for something. But these two letters actually are between her and her manager. They're really interesting. I think the first one is dated February 13th, 1973. Joan Scott warns Diaz to not make waves in regards to asking about publicity for her role in The Two Gentlemen of Verona. She emphasizes the main thing you should do right now is be good in the show. And I think this is because Diaz was concerned about not having enough publicity for her role and the attention. The second one is kind of like, oh, you misunderstood what I was saying. But there was talk about someone replacing her in the tour of the show. So from what I gather, this is I'm trying not to like write a story myself, but she had a feeling that she was going to be replaced, and so she was worried. So she was kind of making moves into seeing like, how can I stick with this production? Um, uh, yeah, so that I think that's what those two letters are mostly about.
Yeah, and here you mentioned Poppy, so I wanted to show this photo. And you also shared with Kabachi, to put in the links, an interview with Hector Zelio talking about
Oh yeah,
Poppy as
yes.
well.
So he further explains just like how essentially how it wasn't ready for, or maybe the um, we're in the middle.
Oh, I'm sorry.
In the office around.
Anyone?
Why do you
One
keep
second,
talking?
sorry. Yeah. So he was basically talking about how they probably weren't ready for a cast or a topic based all on a Latino family, and this was actually started off as a made-for-TV movie, and then it got picked up as a TV show. And the other picture is, like I said before, Miriam Colon as Mama Montana in Scarface. Sorry,
Sorry about that. Working library. I'm a researcher. So I think one of the other really cool things was the fact that they knew each other.
right.
And we do have, let's see, let me look. There we go. We have the one letter.
Yes. So I believe this one was in Edith's collection, which is also interesting that there's a folder titled Edith Diaz in Miriam Colon's collection, which is kind of cool the way these collections kind of talk to each other. But yeah, this letter says, I just wanted you to have a few extra. If you need more, let me know. Not really sure what that means. It could be money, it could be whatever. But I just thought it was really unique that, there was this camaraderie, and also in Edith's collection, she name drops Miriam a couple times, because I think there was this like sisterhood and being like, I know this person, you should audition for this person. And it's actually stated in a couple documents where Miriam Colon, Edith Diaz, who is mostly LA based, would come and stay with Miriam. And so she would write to people and say, I'm staying with Miriam Colon for a little bit. You can reach me here, or you can find me here. So I thought that's really cool. It's like, I don't know anything about Hollywood now, but that camaraderie is really unique, especially in 70s, 80s, 60s when they were acting.
Yeah, I think the camaraderie, as well as the advocacy that you find throughout these collections, they're always, they're promoting themselves, but they're also really standing up for themselves as actresses, as Puerto Rican women, wanting to make sure that they're not getting like written out of parts, or parts aren't getting whitewashed, or they're not getting, pushed to the side. They're really standing up for themselves and each other. And I think you can see that across these collections, which I also think makes it pretty unique. I know also in the Edith Diaz collection, there's some documentation of like fan mail and stuff. And I know that a Miriam Colon collection also has that. Did you find anything interesting?
Yeah, I didn't add it because it was I don't think it's library lunch hour appropriate, but it was what, the 70s, so like it opens I guess floodgates to whoever is a fan of these ladies' work, and they were very beautiful, and fans definitely did ask for pictures, specific pictures, and there was just a lot of thirsty fan mail in it, I think, but also really nice fan mail being like, I loved you in the show and this movie. But it's also cool to see physical fan mail, because I guess now it would be just like Instagram comments. But it's a lot of it.
Yeah, and there's also, as you can see here behind the scenes stuff, one of the cool things about the Miriam Colon collection is we actually have this huge scrapbook that she made, that she kept from her time working in theater in Puerto Rico all the way through the early years of the Puerto Rican traveling theater, as she ascends, kind of her stature into Hollywood. the scrapbook ends around the 60s, like right when she's kind of hitting that pinnacle of working with Brando a number of times. And it's her cutting out pictures of herself in magazines and reviews and just like gossip articles. And she like pastes them in and kind of decorates them. And it's a really stunning visual. We had an exhibit a couple of years ago where we blew up a couple of those images, and they're down in the archives now, and they're just really stunning to see and to kind of reflect on her as, you know, as an artist. Is this whole thing of selling herself, as, you know, she's the mechanism of her art, so she's documenting it. It's such a visual component to it, and I think here what's really fun is finding all these photos from behind the scenes. Like this is from Sister Act. There was a lot of really fun behind the scenes photos from Sister Act, just kind of showing, I guess, kind of the fun side. We're contrasting it to the challenges that they faced as women in Hollywood. But to see this, I don't know, I have to say the Sister Act set looked really interesting and fun because it's a bunch of women and they seem to have a really good time.
Dressed as nuns.
Yeah, nuns having fun.
I think the one thing I did forget to mention was, or I guess it's a little bit more specific in Diaz advocating for herself, and because it could have gone either way, in that roles were whitewashed or she was only being able to audition for stereotypical roles, which is common. And when she caught wind that a role for the ABC Movie of the Week, Get Christie Love, was rewritten and recast to be played by a white actress, Miss Diaz was upset because she auditioned for the role, and she wrote in a letter to the production company, "I write these lines not just for myself, but for every Latin actress who's out there struggling for years, devoting their entire lives to this profession. This change is indeed an insult to all of us." And I think that's a pretty big like statement to make as a, you know, like in being someone in a role where you're kind of asked to just be quiet and do your job, especially a minority actress. I mean, I thought it took a lot of courage for her to write that. I mean, the company did write back and say it was actually fervently requested by Cicely Tyson that the role be changed to a woman who was not of a minority group, because Ms. Tyson pointed out the depiction of minority women in film has almost always been limited to prostitutes or drug addicts. She felt strongly that this was a destructive image, and at the time she refused to do her role unless the aspect of the script was corrected. Which, I mean, like, kind of teeter and totter, but like, at least she said something, you know?
Yeah.
And we have it
Absolutely.
documented.
Yeah, I think that because she was a working actress and, you know, was in all these different movies of the week, and like she had an amazing career. I mean, it was a long career. She did so many. She was, you know, a working actress. And I think that is really fascinating, that part of that is kind of the everyday work of standing up for yourself, advocating for yourself. There's lots of documentation in that particular collection, I think, of her just, you know, being a working person, of what it entails being an actor. There's, you know, documentation of like her housing and rent. And
like this, you know, any issues with SAG or the Actors Union, and like that kind of behind the scenes stuff you don't really see with like the Hollywood glamour. It's like, you know, like they still need to go to a doctor and still need to provide forms just like everyone else does. And so that's also reflective in the collection. Yeah, we can do the other pictures.
oh yeah, sorry.
Sure. Oh, they both played nuns.
Yes.
Edith Diaz was actually a nun twice. She was in a show called Beretta when she was in the 70s, I think. She was also a nun there.
This is our glamour shot.
Yeah, these are the glamour shots. And yeah, I mean, like Edith Diaz also has in her collection a script that she was working on. I'm not really sure the time period. I believe it's undated. But it's another way of her trying to create a role for herself that wasn't, it was like an semi-autobiographical on women she knew. There's not a ton of, it's not complete or anything like that, but it is like a draft or, you know, an early draft of something that she was working on, which is cool.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that really parallels what Miriam Colon did in terms of like founding the Puerto Rican Traveling Theater
Mhm.
and really trying to, I mean, I think the great thing about the Puerto Rican Traveling Theater and the work that Miriam Colon did was that we can see in her collection that it documents both her creating spaces and roles for Puerto Rican and Latinx actors and actresses, as well as bringing these productions to a much more diverse
Yeah.
crowd. Not gatekeeping it because it's too expensive
Right.
or it's only in English. We have a lot of Miriam Colon. We have a good amount of Miriam Colon's collection digitized. A lot of some really fascinating images. One that I frequently use in demonstrating how we actually use our digital archives is one from a performance in which Miriam Colon plays this little girl. But in the photos, I noted that Sophia Manzano is in it, who played Maria in Sesame Street. And it was really cool to see her as a working actress, like outside of Sesame Street, because I know that for me, that's how I only see her, or that's how I've traditionally seen her. So to see her, as a very young actress, this is pre-Sesame Street, working in the theater and like really getting a prime role in this Puerto Rican Traveling Theater presentation, I thought was really cool. I mean, the work that these two women did, as well as, numerous other actresses that we don't have the collections of. I don't want to diminish the work that all of these women were doing in the 50s, 60s, 70s to establish themselves in the acting world, as well as kind of building opportunities for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think from there, allowing future actresses to have a space, be able to take on roles, be able to be the stars of things. And it's really cool to see through a working actress, a working like everyday actress, doing lots of different parts, to someone who ended up having more, I'm going to say substantial roles, because I think every role within production is important, but somebody who became more famous in Hollywood.
More feature films.
Yeah, more feature films, and what their collection entails as well. So it's wonderful as we have both of these collections on site at the Library and Archives. So if people are interested, you could come here and look at them. I know that we linked out to their finding aids, so you can see kind of what is in the collection. Edith Diaz's collection's a lot smaller than Miriam Colon's, but I think it also has a similar feel and covers a similar amount of material in terms of types of material, and really seeing into what it was to be an actress, what it was to work.
And also personal life.
Yeah.
I believe they both have tons of like family photos, just stuff like that.
Yeah, very, we say behind the scenes, and then there's also that personal aspect that's really well documented in both collections. Were there any real standouts from the Edith Diaz, just because I know you know that collection so well? Were there any standout items or parts of the collection that we haven't talked about?
And I didn't add it to the slides, but so we do have a sister act. What is it? A golden record?
Yeah, a gold record.
Gold record for the sister act soundtrack, which I think is really cool. But I think with her collection, definitely looking through a lot of the fan mail, because I don't know, it kind of paints a picture of what it was like to be in, I guess, in Hollywood at that time. And even though she wasn't like this superstar in sense of, like the lead of her own TV show, which actually kind of was, but it, the conversation, like the way people wrote to her, and I don't know, it just paints a picture of that time. I think is so, like, I guess, what is that, the golden age of television?
Yeah,
I think I might just be saying that, but I think like it gives you access into that world that might have been kind of lost if it wasn't saved through these records.
Absolutely. And I would say, first thinking about an actress's collection, it's kind of like, well, what's going to be there? Because is it just going to be a lot of tapes? And we do find there's a lot of AV components to both of these collections in terms of, I know Miriam Colon has like several copies of Scarface, like off the TV, like professional ones that, So we have those in the archives, as well as, you know, reels of her acting for her trying to get jobs and everything. And I was really curious, like, what they would entail, and to really see the volume of paper that it produced in images, so many photographs of them and their work, as well as we've said, so much of the personal, the behind the scenes. I think both those collections just paint such a fascinating story of actresses and like what it is to work in Hollywood. And beyond that, we have several other collections. Like, these are not the only women in performing arts that we have. They were two that you know, Herbert processed the Edith Diaz collection recently, and we recently processed the Miriam Colon collection. So we've really, I think those have kind of been on our mind, and as we've been having so many discussions in the archive as we were processing, as we were writing the finding aids of what these collections show. But I would also shout out to, we have the Tina Ramirez collection. She was a dancer, a prolific dancer. We have a really wonderful collection of hers. She ran Ballet Hispanico for many, many years. So we have some material from Ballet Hispanico from some of the choreographers that also kind of documents what she did as a real pioneer in dancing. I think very similar to Miriam Colon and Edith Diaz in terms of charting her own course and taking advantage of any, you know, of these opportunities to make a stand for herself as a woman and as a dancer and as someone who can really represent Puerto Rico and the Puerto Rican experience in the diaspora, which I think is really wonderful. So at this point, do you have anything else to add?
No. I don't
Okay,
think so.
great. So now we can open it up to questions, which I neglected to mention that you can put your questions in the Q&A. So we'll give people a few minutes to do that if there's any questions. Yeah, we'll give people a minute. Well, while people are thinking of questions they might have, one thing we didn't mention that I thought was really interesting that you brought up was the involvement that the actresses have in like writing with congressmen. I know like Miriam Colon was writing to Herman Badillo and other people.
So that, yeah, the one in particular, that one is in Miriam Colon's collection in the folder labeled Edith Diaz. After Diaz was fired from Two Gentlemen of Verona, I'm assuming she contacted Miriam, and Badillo contacted Ocasio and wrote a letter in support of Diaz. I don't see any final like verdict of that situation, but there is a lot of documentation, especially in Edith Diaz's collection. Because it was she was really worried about her reputation being ruined after being fired publicly. So and at that time, or I guess like in any business where you are the business that is, you have your reputation ruined, is kind of, could be really bad.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I thought it was really interesting that, you know, involving politicians to try to advocate for them and on behalf of them. Okay, we can keep this conversation going. So, looking at our notes.
Well, also I see on the link, or in the links, I did link Marlon Brando's One-Eyed Jacks. This is a movie with Miriam Colon. She actually collaborated with Brando twice, also in the Appaloosa. And it's what I thought was interesting. These are earlier on in her career. These films are like westerns where she played either like Native American or Mexican, which she was not. And then towards the end of her career, she starred in All the Pretty Horses, which is another western, which I thought was cool. And she kind of talks about a little bit more in depth in another link with the NPR Fresh Air interview from 2003. Yeah, she definitely had kind of used the racial ambiguity of her likeness to be casted in kind of these very exoticized roles, which I thought was really interesting. And she talks about kind of, um, you know, in more depth in these interviews. Also in the oral history project.
Yeah, so she was part of our in 2013 with our 40th anniversary, we did the 100 Puerto Ricans oral history project, which was, initially an idea of let's get 100 interviews from 100 Puerto Ricans who had significant contributions to their field of work as well as to the Puerto Rican community. And that grew to about 300 Puerto Ricans before we sunsetted the project. But Miriam Colon was one of the first people that we interviewed, and we have two full session interviews with her that are available, video interviews on the digital collections, which are linked to here. And yeah, in it, she really dives into her experience as an actress, coming out of Puerto Rico, getting involved in the theater, coming to New York, founding the Puerto Rican Traveling Theater, what drove her, her motivations behind that, and what really, as we've kind of mentioned, that void that she saw in providing access to a larger group of people and kind of breaking down those barriers, and I think opening up a lot of doors to a lot of different artists, not just women actresses or playwrights, but a lot of different ones.
And we linked the Puerto Rican Traveling Theater website.
Yes, we did. Yep.
So it's still going. Her legacy remains.
Yeah. So we have a question. Thank you, Arcadio, for joining us as we talk about your sister. And yeah.
Oh, wow.
So it says, could you please talk a bit more about what archives reveal about racial, gender, or cultural discrimination in Hollywood or in the theater in New York or other cities?
I mean, if using Edith Diaz's collection, there were documents in which she is writing to managers or other people in the business, kind of in a really interesting place where she's going against colorism, stereotypes, not being Latin enough, or not looking Latin enough, or not playing up to the stereotypes, or having directors tell her to act a different way. In that sense, this collection really does zero in on the discriminations a working actor in that time that was of color or a woman had to deal with. There's also, from remembering now, there's letters between her and other working actors throughout. Like they were like, "Oh, I'm finishing a show here. It's awful. Like I can't wait for it to be over." Stuff like that. But yeah, I think I don't know if I answered the question. I did. I think it. Yeah.
And I think likewise in Miriam Colon's collection, there is definitely clear documentation of her having to push against those similar issues of being too much of one thing or not enough of another. I mean, the fact that she is, especially at that time, and I think it's a challenge to a lot of actors and actresses of color, is how much you go into like lean into the stereotypes or like accept those roles that are not, that like give you work, but also provide not a great stereotype of a ethnicity or race. And I think that she talks about it in her interview, as well as
I mean, but it's just an interesting topic because like there were already very few roles for them to audition. They were all kind of, in a sense, I get the feeling like kind of fighting for the same roles, and it's not like it is today, which there's still work to be done, but like there is more of a spectrum or a range of what a Latin character is today versus what it was when these actresses were auditioning. So these archives, kind of cement the fact that, yeah, that they did have to like audition to be drug addicts or prostitutes or stuff like that, because that was the stereotype.
Great.
This one.
Oh, that's from
Oh.
Central. Thank you so much. I hope that answered the question. All right. All right. So, I mean, are there other collections that you think also speak to that? I know we were focusing on these two, but
I mean, yeah. I think that's it's kind of innate in this collection, or in this in Centro, that a lot of, because I kind of liken these two actors' collections to more of like an organization, because they were kind of their own business. So in that sense, like organizations like Aspira were all created for like advocating for the Puerto Rican peoples. In this sense, they were advocating for themselves as Puerto Rican actresses, trying to, make money and pursue their passion. So I think a lot of our collections touch on that feeling of being here and kind of just fighting to be seen or to be respected or be treated equally. So, I can't think of anything else right now.
yeah, I mean, when I think about our collections, especially, it's Women's History Month, and we're talking, we're using women and the arts as a jumping off point, but I also think of collections like Helen Rodriguez Trias, who is a doctor and a fierce advocate for reproductive rights and for AIDS and HIV work in the 80s. And I see throughout her, she also has a decent sized collection of about maybe like 7 cubic feet. And that collection also has tons of documentation of her advocacy for the communities that she represented, for these underrepresented communities, and for herself as a woman of color who is also, a physician, and in a time where there's not, an overabundance of female physicians fighting for these, I think at the time and even now, like underrepresented communities of women's rights and HIV rights. And I see that kind of very similar, that echoing the advocacy that women like Edith Diaz and Miriam Colon were doing within their collections. And I think you kind of see that throughout. We have so many women collections, which I think is such a benefit to our archive. We have so many strong women who are doing so much work. We have Antonia Pantoja, we have Anita Velez Mitchell, we have all these women in so many different fields of community organizing and, health and reproductive rights, and throughout the arts. I mean, there are so many collections in the arts that we have of women, and all of them are doing that advocacy for themselves, I think, throughout, which is something that you can come to the Central Library and Archives and see. We also have a lot of those materials online in our digital collection. So I really suggest if people can't come to Centro, that they're able to come to the Library and Archives through our digital collections and see a lot of the work. As I said, we have a lot of Miriam Colon as well as other actors or artists, female artists, and other female collections.
Yep.
Any closing words for us on these? Oh, great. We have another collection. Is there any part of your digital collection that you think would be especially beneficial to young Latinas and who are looking to pursue careers in the arts, specifically dance and acting as role models? So definitely the Miriam Colon collection provides, it's not the whole collection, but it's a nice representation of what's in the collection, as well as Tina Ramirez is another great collection that's represented. If you actually search like dance and acting, those are keywords that can bring you a lot of results. And there's definitely beyond Miriam Colon a number of actors and dancers and other performing artists in our oral history projects that are available digitally as either they were audio oral histories or the video oral histories that I think you hear directly from people talking about their experience, and I think could be wonderful role models. I know that Miriam Colon interview in the 100 Puerto Ricans is, I mean, it's like 3 hours, I think, in total of her just talking about her experiences and being very candid. And that's a wonderful thing, I think, about the oral histories in particular, is that it allows someone to really open up and speak about themselves and their experience and reflect upon their life and the challenges they face, but also the triumphs. So those are some off the bat, but I definitely say keywords like dance and acting would also offer a lot of results. And you could also do that in our archival collections to kind of see what we might have in our archival collections as well. Yes, the digital collections are available through the website. We link to them in the comments or in the chat, excuse me, like right at the very beginning. I'm sure that Camacho would be able to do it again. Oh, and I just wanted to share from Alma Concepcion. Thank you for joining us as well. She taught at Ballet Hispanico for 11 years and admires Tina's passion for dance and teaching, but most especially for her commitment to the Latino community. Thank you for sharing that very much. Yeah, her collection is also just ripe with so much amazing work of her work at Ballet Hispanico, and a lot of her teaching documentation, which I think is really fascinating for the Tina Ramirez collection, as well as a lot of the work, advocating and promoting Ballet Hispanico and all the work that she did there. And I know that we've collaborated with Ballet Hispanico to see what they've asked us, like, what do you have of Tina's stuff, as well as kind of seeing what they have so we can kind of come together. And yeah, and we've linked to the digital collections for specifically for the Miriam Colon collection, but also if you just use that as a jumping off point to search the collections, that works as well.
Yeah. Any more questions? No.
Well, great. We got 2 more minutes. Do you have any? I know I keep asking it.
I'm like,
So I will share the screen one more time so that we can.
oh, maybe the old one there.
Yeah, so one final.
Look, see.
Yeah. And here they are.
Mm-hmm. And they both worked, I think, very well into 2000s, early aughts, I think.
Yeah, I mean,
especially Miriam did like Better Call Saul.
Yeah. Yeah, so their longevity, I think, is really represented in the collection as well, that they span a really long period of time. I think it really showcases all the wonderful things that they did and how all that advocacy that we keep mentioning worked for them, and the strength that they brought to really continuing to pursue what I imagine it's to be a very difficult field to be in, but one full of passion.
Yeah.
So with that, I wanted to wrap up and say thank you, Herbert, for joining us from your first Library Lunch Hour. And thank you, everybody, for attending today and listening to us talk. I hope that you'll visit our digital collections as well as our physical collections. If you want to come visit, please, you can make an appointment and come visit us at the library and archives. So thank you again, and hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.